Today, I'm joined by Susan Lindeque. She has over 35 years of experience in wealth management and works with families to protect, grow, and transfer wealth across generations. Susan, you bring an incredible amount of experience. You've had over 35 years of wealth management experience to the table, and today is a massive milestone, the official launch of Avestix Private Office. But this didn't happen overnight. You built this resilient infrastructure as a third generation single family office first. Now, can you tell us why you decided it was time to open the doors and transition into a multi-family office?
So, Stacey, yeah, good to be on the show. Thank you so much. I think overall, we come at a point, and especially because I just got a granddaughter that's a month and a half old, and there come a point in your life where you decided, you know what, what's my legacy going to be, and how can I actually transfer and help my education and transfer that to other generations? So, I've been very fortunate to be approached by a couple of other families who knows me very well and said, Susan, don't you want to really come and do this for us as well, what you've done successfully for yourself? So that's the reason why I'm opening up the doors to actually just share the blueprint what we've done for ourselves and to help in terms of very complicated world of taxation, of estate planning, of multi-cross jurisdictions, and also the legacy and philanthropical work that we will undertake in a couple of years and just share what we've known with other people as well. So that's why we open up the doors for other families to come on board and why we started our own multifamily office.
I love that. Now, Avestic is privately, matriarch led. So it's with an estimate of 124 trillion expected to transfer across generations over to the next 25 years. Now, women are increasingly becoming the primary wealth creators and inheritors. Like, how does that experience as a female leader change the way Avestic supports families through this profound transition?
Do you know that there's only 5% of women, which is actually the founders of their own family office? And let's break that down. What does it mean to have a family office? It's just a fancy word to say that you got structures in place, which is normally a trust, or you've got an LLC where you want to protect the wealth of the generations in the future to come for your children. And then with that is also taking care of the whole family and the face and the multi-generation. Now, what's happening in the US is that, or on a global basis, is that women outlive men, unfortunately, for various reasons. In my own case, I was 55 when my husband has passed away. The average age for a woman is 58 years old when she becomes a widower. Then what happened normally is that wealth get transferred from the man to the woman, and then from the woman it get transferred to the next generation of children, which we call next gens. So the estimate is that there's going to be 131 trillion, and that number will obviously grow in the next 25 years. That will be transferred over to women and next generations in the next 25 years, which is a phenomenal amount. But you can imagine the impact that will have on the whole business world and the way that we do business, because normally, just face it, women was never at a table when we discuss finance. We were there to just look after the children and basically sitting and making the food, and the husbands were out there as the hunters and they went out in the finance world. And now it's changing. Now the man is handing the bucket over to the woman and said, well, we never actually teach you about business, but now we expect you to basically take care of all these millions.
Right.
So there's a huge education. If you look at it, I think there's statistics out there that said that when women inherit wealth within the first 12 months, they actually change their financial planners, which is stereotype male in the past of their husbands. But now they start looking at other advisors who's more, I think, more towards whether it's more female or they just want to have somebody that's more geared to what they want to achieve at the end of the day.
Right. Now, it changes everything. Like wealth management has traditionally been a very male dominant space, but the future of wealth is highly female. As a matriarch, I look at wealth not just as a capital on a balance sheet, but as a multi generational ecosystem. I know that at Avestix, one of your core values is focusing on empowering women. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Absolutely. Empowerment of women is so important, but you can only empower women if you really educate them. If you don't educate them, then you can't empower somebody because then I will still go back to the old ways. And especially if they coming into a lot of wealth, you have to teach them, and you're not going to do that from day one. So the way that we go about it is really inform them about what is the structures for a family office, what is in what jurisdiction is the money. So sometimes you can have multiple jurisdictions, what mean they can have money in South Africa or Australia or in the US or in Europe or in Dubai. And then how do you coordinate all of that? Because it becomes really complex.
Yeah.
And who's the advisors that you need to advise with? And what is the tax complications? Because a lot of the time when somebody falls away, there's huge liquidity issues because you can be coming with some of the assets are illiquid. It means that like real estate, you can't just turn it into cash. You have to
Yeah.
sell it and you can have huge tax liabilities. So those are all the complications. And if there's not a proper succession plan in place where you start educate women around that, then it becomes a real problem. So we are at Avestix, we are really committed to help women and to educate them in terms of all these complications and to just assist them in terms of the wealth transfer.
I love that. Like we hear a lot of buzz about like AI right now, but you talk about the critical difference between AI literacy and AI fluency. Like, what is the difference and why is it so dangerous for a family office to get it?
AI literacy is only when you go like on Gemini or when you go on OpenAI, as everyone knows it, and you're just putting a prompt and you just ask it a question. That's effectively. But when you're really becoming fluent in AI, it means you understand a lot more. You understand the structures, you understand what's the security risk, you understand how to maybe even code because you don't need to be a coder these days to start coding. I spent a lot of my time in terms of backend coding now. If you learn cloud code, and I had one of my friends actually joking, and he was from South Africa and said the last time he got involved with cloud was Van Dammen, Claude Van Dammen. So he didn't even know what I was talking about. But so the issue is the security and where your data goes. So it's not about even coding. It's about really understanding that when you transact or interact with a certain system, like OpenClaw, that data, whatever you upload in the internet, is no longer yours. It becomes public information, and that might end up with all different regions in the Middle East or China, and you don't know what happened to your data. So you think that it's private, and it can be very sensitive information for anyone, not just for a family office
Yes.
where they can have financials or they can have governments, or it can even result with the biggest threat for families is where they start where there's the danger of their children can be kidnapped because of money and ransoms. And with AI becomes so sophisticated now that they can literally personalize any person out there in terms of they can fake your voice, they can actually demand that you transfer money because you think it's a real person.
Right.
So from that perspective, it is so important to understand what is the dangers. And if you don't immerse yourself into it, you're just going to become a risk factor at the end of the day, and they're going to have you a ransom. They're going to hold you a ransom.
That is insane, and I don't think people realize that either. I
No.
think people, they have no clue when they're typing into these systems, these AI systems, how sensitive it is and how much data it inputs into the system. And certain people can get a hold of that easier than they realize. And so you have to be really careful. And I think a lot of people are unaware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of resources out there. You can go onto YouTube, you can speak to your bankers, you can speak to financial people. But it's so important, I think, at the end of the day, that every mom and dad takes that responsibility and pass that on to their children.
Yes.
Because on the 31st of March, I actually posted on my LinkedIn profile to say it's a significant shift that happened because there was a leak in Anthropic documents for Claude AI or Claude OpenAI, and a lot of people didn't even realize it.
Right.
It's just that the way that we are moving into with artificial intelligence and with agencies that will do all the work on behalf of us, it's no longer just you can't just go by the old ways on our education system. With all due respect, that's like 10, 15 years behind. You
Right.
have to start looking at new ways and teach your children to become engineers and really understand this new world that we are going into.
Right. Oh, I agree 100%. In the industry, there is the concept of how talent dense, paradox. Like, how does this tie into like the digital fortress? Because I don't think people realize how it does.
Yeah, that's why I said at the end of the day, it is so important to look at cybersecurity, to look at basically safety, and to make sure that you got your own system that's really become a fortress around your own identity. And we will move back. I remember when I started working a long time ago, we had our own servers on premise of the businesses. Now we got everything up in the cloud and all your data is somewhere and you don't even know where it is. It's just somewhere in the data warehouse of one of these big mega skylers. But there's a movement where you now start moving, where they start moving the data much closer to the people. I don't know whether that will be a hybrid between on premise or closer to you, but definitely there's definitely a movement to a lot more data security. You own that data. That data doesn't get owned by the big ones like Google or Microsoft or Facebook. And I think if people realize that and that they need to safeguard their information and it's their information, I think that's where the shift will happen.
100%. Now let's talk about wealth structure. And you often mention that families fall into this like hotel California trap where like legacy investment structures are like easy to check into, but you can never leave. How does Avestix, dismantle that for you?
So yes, I always refer to that as the California hotel because it's easy to check in, but then to leave becomes so hard because the world of especially family offices are very complicated. They got a lot of trust. They got a lot of structures like company setups. And as you moved on from one generation to another generation, the purpose and the reason why you initially set it up is continuously changing. And especially as we get into the newer generation, where a lot of the young generation is into digital, they're not into analog anymore. It's becoming so difficult for them. So you have to look at it because sometimes it can just become this whole, I would say, web with spider webs with you don't know where you're going to end up. So it's important to always review the structures and to always look at is the structure still doing the same job that it was supposed to do like 25 years ago? Do
Yeah.
we really still need it? Do we need all this complexity? Isn't there a much simpler way? Tax laws change forever as well. So you need to be mindful of that as well to say, well, the tax laws are there for a reason. It's not to avoid tax, but to how can I minimize my tax that's legitimate according to the tax laws? And how do I do that? So that's why I'm always saying, and again, it comes down to the education because if you don't involve your children in it, they're never going to learn. And that's what I always said that with succession planning, by the second generation, there's problems, and the third generation, the wealth is gone because you don't educate your children on what it is that I really need to understand in terms of the business, in terms of the finance. And sometimes the children got completely different ideas what they want to do with their life compared to the founder who started it maybe 30 or 40 or 50 years or 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So you have to evolve.
Right. Oh, I agree. Now, financial clarity is one, it's another huge pain, point. A lot of confusion comes from expecting one single accounting style to answer questions it was never designed to answer. As chartered accountant who is currently in the process of converting to a CPA, how do you solve this for your clients?
By doing it multiple ways. There's international accounting standards, which a lot of the people know, which is across the border, and there's then US GAAP, which is specifically only for the US. But then you also get like cash treatments, which means that the way that you treat your cash. And then when you get into the cryptos, that's a different treatment as well. So I think there's no one rule for everything. I think as a family and what I do in the businesses, you have to, at the end of the day, put everything together and consolidate it. But it's to do different versions and different reportings to just simplify it. And again, I'm referring back to the women because a lot of the women don't have this knowledge of complicated consolidations, and it's going to go just right over their heads. You have to simplify that for them. And if you can break it down and just give them like different snapshots, I think that will help a lot, you know what, and just help them to get educated a lot more.
I agree 100% with that. You also handle the highly emotional side of wealth. Like, for example, family, vacation, homes are often deeply meaningful, but without governance, how can, you tear a family, they can tear a family apart, really, if you think about it. How do you help families govern these shared assets?
I think this with the governance and with any family, you know, and most families got like a second home, which I got as a vacation home. And that's always a good thing where I said, you know, that's really a good place where people can start in a relaxing environments and they can talk about succession planning. What happened if grandpa is not there going to be? What happened if any of your gets into this or this situation? And then what do you need to do? So it's really a relaxing environment where you can start teaching them about the government governance, what needs to happen. And I still believe the biggest thing with any family is just really education and be open in communication. There's a lot of complexities within any families dynamics. You can just think about your brothers or your sisters and aunts and all of that involved. So I think if you can just break that down and then have clear communication about what that governance is going, because a lot of the fights is happening is about money, where it's going to go. And if there's open and transparency about that and fairness, I think we can go a long way with that.
Right. I agree. On the investment side, Avestix brings like institutional grade solutions to the table, including direct indexing, 3.0. Like, how do you pair aggressive optimized investing with impact?
So there's a movement in not just for the families, but I don't know if you know, even Stacey, there's like 80% of all capital that's basically get raised in the world goes to institutions. So the rest of the 20% is basically for private equity, for alternatives, which is just another word for real estate, for venture capital, for anything that's not public equities. So at the end of the day, what we do at the Avestix is really looking at institutional grade investments for the other families. It's also on demand on what they want to invest. It's not really we got a fiduciary duty for them to basically invest according to what they want to do, not what we think that we want to do, unless we think that it's not in their best interest. So then we got the authority and the fiduciary duty, obviously, to decide. But at the end of the day, for us, it's really important to make sure that we, although we're not the institutional, but semi quasi, that we really tick all those boxes and that we really make sure that the investment opportunities we bring to our families are really of high standard,
Yeah.
that we do our due diligence on it, that we tick all the boxes, that the legals are done, accountings, audits are done. So that's really important.
Oh, yes, definitely. Now, Susan, we've talked a lot about preparing the next generation, but I'd love to get a little personal. You have a young daughter, Alina. As a mother and a matriarch, and a financial veteran of 35 years of your experience. How are you preparing Alina for this rapidly changing digital world?
She's only 1.5 months old. And what we already start doing is really start basically take some of the digital money, put that into a safe place for her in our offshore trust. And we basically going to make sure then by the end of the day that gets she gets the keys when she's 21 years old. Our whole basis for her is just education from day one to really follow the trends that's out there into the digital world. And that will be a combination between AI, between quantums coming, between robots. In 10 years' time, all of us will have a robot in our house, at least in the US. Maybe in other parts of the world, not so much.
Yeah.
Everything, most asset classes will have tokenized. It means that you can break it up in different little pieces and it will be on the blockchain. So I think education is incredible important that we as parents stay abreast of that, that we keep up with that. And it just basically the way that I do it, I do a lot of research, I do a lot of reading, and whether you want to do reading or YouTube, just listen to people, just be open to the changes and not just have blinkers on and say, this is massive AI that's going to take over all our jobs. Is to educate your children onto what is the opportunities. Because as what we went through the internet with Web 2, there will be new opportunities come, but it's how you take advantage and how you educate it. So I started memos to Elena, and I'm going to document all of those for her. And then hopefully, when she's like 5 years old or 7 years old, get her involved in the markets is what I got.
Yes.
And yeah, just document their successes. I mean, when you do a business, it's not always success, that's some hardship, but it's how you react to that and how you stand up and that's basically how you become successful at the end of the day. So yeah, just hold her hand and help her to learn as much as possible so she hopefully doesn't make the same mistakes as what I did
Yes.
or yeah,
Or what I did.
what all of us did at the end of the day. Yeah.
What is like one of the pieces of advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
I think if there's one piece of advice is to just embrace this new AI economy and digital economy. It's not just about AI. It's really about the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolutions. Basically learn as much as possible, listen as much as possible, what you can do, learn about AI, robotics, quantum, yeah, just everything. And I think one piece of advice which I got from somebody, which I'm very guilty of, because sometimes I can focus on 100 things. You just focus on one thing, do that well for 6 months, and then you can move on to something else. But and also to do, because it doesn't just help you listen and you follow on social media. It's actually when you start doing stuff, when you're getting involved, whether that's you want to start a small little business as a woman, is by actually learning from other women. Go to workshops,
Yes.
learn from them, and then try to do that then in your part time or spare time and build that up. It's actually by doing whatever you want to do in life. And that's the only way that you can learn. And again, like I said, you might fail at the end of the day. Your coffee shop or your restaurant might not work out, but it's okay. You know what? You close it down, you do what you do, and then you start again. And then you take all your lessons and you just basically amplify on that and you just build from there. So that is my number one recommendation.
I love that. That's a great recommendation. Susan, I want to thank you so much. You have given a whirlwind of information, and I wish I knew a lot of these things when I was first starting out, when I was younger. And if we can teach people now, even women our age now, to make certain changes, it can turn our lives around if we learn how to, take our funds and how to reinvest and how to do things differently and how to properly use AI and how to use these things to our advantage. Precious. And and one thing I love that you mentioned is that you talked about how many businesswomen they are. I went to a convention several years back, and I did not realize how many successful business women run companies in the United States and how well they do. That it's not just startups or entrepreneurs. There's tons and tons and tons of women running $10 million companies, $20 million companies, $1 billion companies, and they do it very successfully. And it's women like yourself who teach these women how to do things like that they need to do. And for the women who aren't there yet, you can give them the advice and the guidance and hold their hands to get to that point. And that's what I love about you, is that you have all this knowledge and that you're willing to share it with the world. So where can people actually find you to learn how to do some of the things we talked about today?
Yes, so we're in our process of redo our website, but currently on our website, www.avestix.com, there's some forms there that I can fill in anyway, and the contact details will come right through to the team. Or they can DM me directly on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's always a good place as well. And then once we got our new website just refreshed and updated as well, we'll have a lot more information there. And yeah, but the easiest way, like I said, is just LinkedIn or our website.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Well, I thank you so much, Susan, for coming on the show today. And for anyone who doesn't know, she's on our podcast community, and the amount of knowledge she shares is so worth taking the time out just to listen to what she has to say, because she is just amazing when it comes to helping women succeed in business and to do well financially. So, Susan, I just want to say thank you for being on the show today. I look forward to our future shows together, and you're just a wonderful individual overall.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You have a great day.
Thank you.